We are entering a period of generational change in artificial intelligence. Until now, machines have never been able to exhibit behavior separate from humans. But new generative AI models are not only capable of carrying on sophisticated conversations with users, they also generate seemingly original content. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Analytics Insight podcast, where we dive into the tech innovations that are shaping our world. And I'm your host, Priya Dialani. Now, GenAI, as you may know, represents a cutting edge evolution of artificial intelligence capable of generating content, analyzing complex data sets, and even solving intricate business challenges. But with this power comes a responsibility to mitigate risks and ensure data privacy, two critical components that we'll focus on in today's discussion. Additionally, we'll also look into the promising future of GenAI and what it means for businesses, security, and everyday applications. To help us understand these complex dynamics, I'm thrilled to welcome Arun Ramchandran, also known as RAC, President and a Global Head at GenAI Unit, High Tech and Professional Services Vertical Hexaware. Hi, RAC, how are you doing?
Very good, Priya. Thanks. And thanks for having me on the podcast.
Great. It's a pleasure to have you with us on our podcast. And of course, we are going to talk about, I think we are going to address the elephant in the room, Gen AI, and everybody's talking about it. But before
Yeah.
that, we would like to know more about Hexaware. If you could help us understand more about the company, its specialization, particular solution the company is offering.
Sure. I think the way to look at Hexaware is think of us as a billion-dollar startup. We are close to 1.5 billion in revenues, but we consider ourselves in a startup mode, very entrepreneurial in terms of culture. I joined them 7.5 years ago, and within those years itself, we have gone through two major pivots and strategic changes, focused very much on data, AI, software engineering, and helping build the cutting edge technology platforms and products for our customers. We've been around for a while. We primarily India headquartered in terms of a number of people, but we are a global company, right? We have offices in US, Europe, everywhere. We compete with the best tier one players. We have some marquee Fortune 100 clients in different industries. And as I was mentioning, one of our differentiators is the quality of our people and the kind of client satisfaction that we deliver in helping them transform themselves, whether to digital or other emerging technologies. We are also owned by Carlyle, which is one of the largest private equity firms in the world. Uh, we're shortly going to, you know, be in the news for further growth, acquisitions, and so on. Happy to be here.
Great, thank you so much, Rak. And I think Exaware is kind of has a diverse nature of business. I'm really glad to know about it. Moving ahead, since we discussed about the company, we would also like to know more about you, Rak. A pretty fascinating name to me, I will say. So if you could tell us more about yourself, how has the journey been till date? If you could tell us more about your role and contribution towards the company.
Sure, Priya. Yeah, and since you mentioned about the name, when I was growing up in campus, my name used to be R. Arun Kumar. It's Arun Kumar Ramchandran, but the way you write it and the way it was put out there. So when I was at IIT Bombay, that's where I did my undergraduate BTech. And even later on during my MBA at IIM Cal, everybody used to call me Rak. And that name has stuck even through subsequent career changes. A lot of people I work with are from my network from IIT and IIM, and they instantly connect with me based on it. So I've kept it. I've kept it. My friends call me that name. So uh, that's the origin of how I'm called Rack. I've been in the technology services industry for over 25 years now, getting closer to 30. Been in the Bay Area in Silicon Valley for almost the same time frame. I pretty much live in the heart of Silicon Valley, been with some of the major known names like Infosys and Capgemini before I joined Hexaware. I've primarily always been on the front end with clients, managing P&Ls and helping clients undertake their transformation journeys. In Hexaware, I wear three hats. I lead one of our largest business units, a vertical, which is focused on high-tech clients and professional services clients. So these are clients in the space like social media platforms, tax audit accounting, legal services, and so on. It's been doing very well. West Coast has become a pretty large growth area for us now. Uh, the other hat I wear right now is leading our GenAI unit, which is what we're going to talk about today, right? And in that, I essentially lead our go to market, our new offerings, technology partnerships that we have in GenAI, and also the competency and enablement that allows us to deliver on GenAI engagements. In addition to these two, I wear a third hat, which is as the chief mentor for our Hexaware Future Leaders and Executives program, which is to hire MBA graduates from tier one institutes in India, in Mexico, and manage their onboarding, their career growth for the first 3 years as they become future leaders for Hexaware in various positions.
Great, quite an impressive journey and an impressive background, I must say, Rak, and thank you for sharing that. So
Thank
let's
you.
dive deeper into the Gen AI landscape. I think in an era where technology influences the fate of businesses, generative artificial intelligence, Gen AI, has emerged as a game changer, and it's creating like an enduring impression on industries and leaders worldwide from igniting amazement to sparking interest. Its influence impacts everyone, I believe. So, and accordingly, I think Gen AI technology will also create like a profound disruption to industries and may ultimately aid in solving most of the complex problems that the world is facing today. So, what are your views, on the current landscape of Gen AI, and which sectors do you think will benefit majorly from it?
So there is a hype and there is a reality. I totally agree with you, Priya. It's going to be one of the most transformative technologies that has emerged in the recent past. On par, I would say, in the long run, with something like electricity, with something like internet. Uh, so the changes it will bring about will be profound. When and how, obviously, still to be determined. uh, People talk about the hype, right? And there are multiple studies around it. I mean, last 2 years, you couldn't go through one article, one event, one discussion without the Gen AI topic being discussed, right? We're talking about McKinsey saying it'll add trillions of dollars to the world economy just based on productivity and new revenue streams. We're talking about, customers and clients adopting it to get things done much faster and cheaper. And then there is the whole aspect of, oh, it's risky. It will take on what humans do. It can even bring about some Armageddon kind of scenarios, whether it's nuclear warfare or biological pathogens and so on and so forth. And as with all these things, the reality, I believe, will be somewhere in between. Even in the last 2 years, we have seen that even the initial promise of Gen AI has been tempered with growing reality that some things need to be put in place first to get the most out of Gen AI, whether it is the right security aspects, whether it is the data readiness, whether it's the change management. So we are seeing clients adopt it, enterprise adopt it, consumers adopt it. We are already seeing some benefits, whether it's in healthcare, in terms of disease detection, whether it's in insurance, in terms of customer agents, whether it is in financial services, in terms of fraud detection and anomaly detection, whether it is in retail and manufacturing, in terms of supply chain and inventory management. We are already seeing some of this. But the best is still to come. And of course, there needs to be a lot more which will have to be done to bring about that reality and not get into the risk part of it.
Definitely. Thank you for that a clear and a precise explanation. And like you mentioned, GenAI has a lot of potential, but definitely there are a lot of factors that organizations need to consider when they're trying to implement GenAI solutions and systems in their respective organizations. And I think with that great power, there comes a great responsibility as well, especially when we talk about data privacy. I mean, it's really fascinating to see how GenAI is not just innovating business processes, but also improving security protocols. But even with all these safeguards, we still live in a world where data breaches and misuse remain significant concerns. Cyber attacks continue to pose a danger, and also, the regulatory demands are continually evolving. So this, in turn, has made it difficult to manually analyze a massive amounts of heterogeneous data that organizations or businesses have to deal with on a daily basis because it's both time consuming as well as error prone. So how do you think, Gen AI can mitigate these risks while also maintaining data privacy?
Well, I mean, I think you mentioned some key aspects there, right? The ability of Gen AI to analyze and interpret a huge amount of data, which can help analyze patterns, whether it is attacks like DDoS attacks, whether it is security breaches, and also help in creating algorithms and mechanisms to prevent this, right? Obviously, we all agree that maintaining data privacy, maintaining the right security, access, ensuring there is no exfiltration, right? Data getting out, no prompt injections of harmful stuff, no deep fakes or less hallucinations are all the right things to aspire for. Now, I mean, one of the things we can do and start being done is the right kind of encryption, which is at the base, right? I mean, even without Gen AI, we're talking about encryption technologies, whether data is at rest or on transit. We're talking about differential privacy, right? Access controls, which help in the way data sets are analyzed by different people who can access it, what kind of extraction you can do of the patterns without necessarily revealing the underlying, individual data or confidential information, and so on. There is now also something called federated learning. So you know how these models, large models learn, right? They just pick up data from various sources and they are used to then train the nodes, the weights of the deep learning algorithm which is there. And then obviously the analysis, the output comes out, and then it gets tweaked over a period of time. What is now starting to be done is a concept called federated learning, where a model learns from various data sources, but these data sources don't mingle with each other. So you still have that differential kind of privacy separation, and the output which the model gives to different users is also based on access controls and who should have or has the ability to access the different data sources. So it allows for a different kind of privacy which you can do while you are coming out with the output. There are other things also, right? There are aspects of holding local data. There are people who are doing techniques of making sure it done on a private cloud and not sent to public cloud, regular monitoring of these vulnerabilities and so on, making sure the apps are secure, the API endpoints are secure. So there are multiple aspects to managing the risk of security and privacy, which can happen at any point in the chain, right? From the data side to the model, to the prompt, to APIs, and when somebody's using it. And how do you really do a holistic approach to handling this? Technology is evolving, and we are seeing a lot of progress in that front.
Completely agree and great points, Rack. I think it's one thing to develop technology, but it's another to make sure that it's being used ethically and within the legal boundaries. And I think generative AI has massive implications for business leaders, and many companies have already gone live with some cutting edge generative AI initiatives. In some cases, I think companies are also developing custom generative AI model applications by fine tuning their proprietary data. So having
Mhm.
said that, I think businesses across different industries are realizing certain benefits while utilizing generative AI. So they can expand labor productivity. They can personalize customer experience. They can even accelerate their research and development through generative design. And of course, probably also think of some emerging new business models. So while we are talking about these benefits, I want to understand how do you think that tech companies can leverage these Gen AI models to transform their entire work process or boost creativity because we've seen generative AI has some implications in terms of enhancing your creative outputs as well, and of course how they can eventually boost the entire productivity of their employees. So I want to understand those viewpoints from your end.
Yeah, and when you say tech companies, Priya, just clarifying. So these are
Hmm.
both the kind of companies like maybe a Google or a Meta, which is a tech company. And then there
Right.
are technology services companies like us, right, which provide
Yeah. Yeah.
technology services to others. I'm assuming you mean both.
Yes. Yes. That would be great. Yeah.
There's not much major difference, right, in the way Gen AI and AI. So I would consider Gen AI as a continuum. I wouldn't consider it as completely different, right? I mean, we have always had some AI aspects.
Right.
AI has obviously been around for decades and gone through its ups and downs, and obviously now getting the recognition it needs under the hood of Gen AI. But the way I see the continuum is AI has helped in the past with a huge amount of automation and predictive aspects, right? So the it's called traditional AI because of that, because it's predictive. It looks at the data, it looks at the patterns, and based on the deep learning, algorithms and neural networks, it's able to come out with something which the human mind, with its constraints in terms of processing speed or amount of memory power, etc., is not able to do it in that quick a manner or that accurate. So a lot of automation has happened, whether it is related to work, your own productivity. Now with Gen AI, which is more in the creation part, right? The whole aspect of generative means that it is able to create something new based on what has been inputted, whether it is in terms of language, whether it's in terms of images, videos, maybe later on even physical outputs like a robot, what robot does. So how and that actually is now layering on top of automation to what I would say is helping augment human capabilities in certain areas. When I say augment, human beings could do it, but they may not have the time to do it, or they may get somebody else wanting to do it so that it can complement what human beings are doing. So it could be call center, right? We're talking about a agent becoming more productive because now a Gen AI bot is able to augment when the agent is talking to a client with client specific context, with certain solutions, real time suggestions based on what it's extracting from past such calls or policy data or contextual information. On top of it then becomes more amplification, right? So what does amplification mean? uh, Gen AI and AI tools can do things so much faster. They can process hundreds of thousands of documents. They can process data points, which will take years sometimes for human beings to do, right? I mean, a typical human being comes across, let's say, 2 billion words in his lifetime or lifetime. The Gen AI tool can ingest this in just a matter of minutes. So just the ability to amplify what you can do using this, whether it is in terms of data processing, whether it's in terms of, as I was telling you earlier, fraud detection, understanding how protein structures are being done so that it can come out with novel ways of treating some diseases. And then ultimately, I think the holy grail in a way is autonomous, right? So how some of these Gen AI tools, now they are called agents, can do certain workflows independently after that initial guidance, after the initial fine tuning and human feedback, and how they can actually help boost productivity because now you can let some of these workflows and processes be done by AI agents and tools themselves. And underlying all this, as we talk about it, creativity becomes important, right? How can you have certain new documents, a certain new campaigns, certain new images, visual, otherwise, which can help with whether it's sales and marketing, whether it is new business models. How can analytics discover those kind of patterns and trends which it can take forward? So whole amount of uh, whether it's transformation of operations, enhancing of creativity, boosting productivity, right from repetitive automation, augmentation kind of stuff to more, value added, amplified, autonomous, creative workflows and outputs. I think it has a range of things. For us as a services company, and let me just touch upon that a little bit, we understand Gen AI can impact what we do to our clients on an intimate basis. So whether it is things like software engineering, how we code, that Gen AI can accelerate that. How we understand business requirements, which can need to be coded or engineered. How do we understand How do we speed up the aspect of creating test plans and testing of what we create? How do we do better in terms of IT service desk and operations, right? Handling calls and resolving issues and problems. How do we enhance our employee productivity through better knowledge sharing internally through tools like GPT? How do we make sure that our sales and marketing becomes more efficient by responding to RFPs, reusing reusable contents, and taking decisions for employee engagement? So everything that we do in terms of our services, building, testing, transforming, migrating stuff is all infused with Gen AI now. And that's a big impact in terms of productivity. Obviously, we have the security guardrails to make sure it's all secure and trusted. But I think the biggest transformation in the future will be on the growth side, which is new business models, new revenues, and creativity.
Definitely, I completely agree with you, Rag, and thank you for giving such an insightful viewpoints on on how companies can leverage these Gen AI tools and systems, and how it can also augment human capabilities. But I guess on the flip side, the powerful capabilities of Gen AI also raise critical ethical concerns,
Mhm.
regarding bias or transparency, unintended societal consequences. I think that that must be proactively addressed as adoption continues growing rapidly. Because I think one of the most pressing issues that I've come across with speaking with so many leaders is the perpetuation of unfair bias based on the flaws in the training data or algorithms. I think without
Mhm.
careful consideration, models can learn and amplify existing societal biases around race, gender, ethnicity, and more anything any such factors concerned with the bias data. So this leads to more of a discriminatory and outcomes that can severely impact the individuals and groups alike. So what are your views, on the ethical concerns around Gen AI, and probably if you can highlight the significance of regulations?
I think it's an excellent question. I think it is the most important aspect of how
Mhm.
we as human beings and as a society leverage Gen AI for
Yeah,
our benefit rather than getting
right.
sucked into the risk part of it, right? The ethical
Hmm.
concerns that you mentioned are multifaceted. They
Yeah.
touch upon bias. I think you talked about it. They touch upon transparency, right? How transparent is the model, and how much do you understand the inner workings to be able to really figure out whether what came out was correct, makes sense, logical, explainable, and so on. How accountable it is, right? Whether what it does and tells you to do, and if it goes wrong, who is accountable? The model maker, the model itself, the company which is using the model, the individual which is supposed to train it, and then obviously some of the misuse which can happen. We talked about security, we talked about possible aspects like uh, pathogens which can be created for easily, and there could be other things like financial uh, frauds which can be conducted and so on. So just from a ethical bias perspective, obviously the bias arise because all these Gen AI models are being trained on existing corpus of knowledge and data which is human generated, right? This is the first time in human civilization that there has been a technology which can create something of its own. So far, everything which has been created, which you read, which you store, which you have access to, is all human created, right? Human beings created. And human beings are messy. They are they have their own biases, which is reflected in what we write and what we read and so on. And that, when it's sent for training, is obviously what creates certain possible unfair discriminatory outcomes. So it is no different. Let's just take recruitment, right? Hiring. Human beings, when you are a hiring manager, you have your own prejudices. Sometimes they are known to you, sometimes they are hidden biases. And that reflects in the way you go around trying to select a candidate or evaluate somebody. It could be same in terms of credit approvals, it could be terms of loan approvals, and many other things. If you use existing data to train AI and Gen AI tools, it's possible that some of these biases will creep in. But the good thing is, the you can fix some of the things on the Gen AI side once you know that these biases could exist, these weights need to be tweaked, the output is showing certain racist or discriminatory comments or actions. You can fix it. You may, it may be more difficult to fix human beings who have those biases, but you can actually fix some of the Gen AI agents. So there are technologies which exist, which allow you to ensure that some of these transparency, the bias-free data sources, or further fine-tuning of it, or making the RLHF, which makes it easier to understand that output is as free of bias. And there is an explainability aspect. So that whole XAI field is really becoming very important. It allows you now to have an AI agent for an AI agent, which means there could be a companion AI model which is monitoring what the other AI model is doing, how it is coming out with the results, so that as and when the explanation is needed, assuming you reject a whole lot of people in terms of housing approvals, and then somebody comes up with a lawsuit, how do you make sure that the algorithm details are provided so that it's explained in maybe a court or maybe in front of a jury or whatever, right? So there are things like this which need to be put in place, and we are being put in place. I think the some of the regulation has already pointed out that these are risks, right? So the EU AI Act, the Biden executive order, and there are some other similar regulations which have happened in UK and so on. They are all addressing these aspects. The models have to be trained on the right data. There has to be a supervisory aspect to it. There has to be an explainable aspect. There are certain kinds of usages of these models which are high risk and hence have to go through a higher burden of regulation and ethical considerations. So all of these are being put in place. In fact, there was a study by Brookings Institution which highlights that over 60 countries have now adopted some form of AI regulation, right? So underscoring the whole need for such global oversight.
Yes, I think that's really important when you're talking about regulation because it kinds of help in shaping how we'll be adopting Gen AI, especially when we can see a rising adoption of AI. And I think the demand for Gen AI is rising in many sectors. And when you combined, the increased availability of high performing and commercially usable open source large language models, I think that there is an appetite for domain specific models as well. And I was reading this study by Gartner, which says and it predicts that by 2027, more than 50% of the Gen AI models that enterprises use will be specific to either an industry or a business function, which will be like a significant increase from 2023. So, having said that, what are some of the trends do you think or you predict that might come up in the coming years, which will play an important role in shaping the future of Gen AI?
True. Uh, you're absolutely right. I think the adoption of domain-specific models is going to increase. Smaller
Mhm.
language models is going to increase. More open source stuff is going to come in place. I think the one of the biggest trends is going to be, I mean, I referred to it earlier in this session around AI agents. And we are already seeing that agentic workflows which is getting closer to the more autonomous kind of workflows, right? So, and these are not co-pilots. The co-pilots do specific tasks, whereas agentic workflows does a series of tasks almost by themselves, right? For enterprises to gain adoption, and we are still seeing a huge gap between enterprise interest in adopting Gen AI and saying that they want to invest in it versus their actual adoption on a day-to-day basis. And some 80% of the CIOs, CTOs say they are interested. What we have seen in our client mix is only around 15-20% have actually haven't acted on it. And that percentage is going to go up, no doubt. But obviously, once they clean up their issues, concerns around security and data and so on. But as the one of the biggest things is the use of large language models is sometimes not focused on their enterprise needs, doesn't handle their enterprise data and context properly, is costly, takes too much effort in terms of trying to fine tune and pre train and so on. So, more and more towards creating either private LLMs, which could be smaller SLMs. It could be very domain specific, where there's a combination of public data, of course, which the large language models come out with, the enterprise data, which is really the gold mine, which needs to be monetized. and maybe even syndicated data, which could be behind paywalls, which could be behind subscription based services, which is very specific. So, just as an example, for a law firm to really make the best use of Gen AI, they need three kinds of data sets. One is their own legal firm, law firm data, past cases they have fought, precedents, who in their firm can do what kind of specialization, what are the client confidentiality requirements, past history from these clients, and so on. So it could date back to decades. The second kind of data which they will need access is what is syndicated data, like a firm like LexisNexis or someone like that, which actually serves these legal firms through paid data, for, let's say, what happened in a judgment like this, or what was the precedent here, or what are some of the other additional aspects and analysis around it, financial analysis, economic analysis. And then the third is public data, which like you can get from the web and so on. A law firm to succeed using Gen AI will need a combination of all three, and they cannot get it through just public data models, public models. They will have to necessarily create their own domain specific. And there are firms like Harvey, which are doing it just for legal firms. Other firms will start doing it. Bloomberg is trying it. So that's one. I think the other major aspect is I already mentioned explainable AI. I think the other major aspect will be the use of AI at the edge, right? So you will soon have with these SLMs and so on, your phone becoming AI intelligent, but the data doesn't leave your phone. It stays within your own boundary, and hence it can allow you to do things on the edge which don't require that kind of computation and still come across as pretty Gen AI intelligent. So a mix of edge computing, IoT, where things happen on the device rather than centralized, allows more privacy, more control over it. And then, of course, as it moves into more of multimodal, what we are seeing is action models. These are not just language models; they have a combination of language, visual, and action, which is where you could say robots, right? Intelligent robots can actually do things and explain why they are doing things physically rather than just composing something or writing something or putting something on a document or image. And that is going to be the real big, I would say, use case which will come up in the future, which can transform industries like manufacturing, driving, a whole bunch of things where once you have Gen AI enabled agents, embodied agents, which can physically do things in addition to compose and generate text and language.
Great. I think those were some pretty interesting trends that we'll definitely see come up in the coming years. Also, like probably, like discuss the shape, the future of Gen AI. So I think Gen AI innovation carries tremendous potential for a positive impact, but also can come up with some challenges that we must thoughtfully address. And this will require more of a sustained collaboration and an open dialogue between all parties to establish norms, incentives, guidelines, and even technical standards that can enable GenAI technology to be deployed safely, ethically, and for the benefit of humanity as a whole. Well, thank you so much, Arak. It was a pleasure having you with us, and thank you for sharing your expertise on the role of GenAI in how they are reshaping industries, highlighting the significance of ethical and responsible AI usage. It has definitely been an eye-opening discussion, and I'm sure our listeners gain a lot from it.
Thank you, Priya. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to go through some of it. Thank you for asking some very interesting, topical, relevant questions. As you know, this is a very evolving, fast evolving field. Things change every week, if not
Yeah,
every day. So
right.
one has to
Yeah,
keep
right.
up. One has to keep up, and so many things are possible. At the same time, we have to be careful to make sure this technology serves the benefit of humanity rather than, you know, uh, has any risks which can affect
Right.
our future.
Right. Definitely. Definitely. It's a pleasure to have you with us on a podcast, Rack. So thank you for your insights once again.
Likewise, Priya. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So, this is for our listeners. Thank you for tuning into today's episode of Analytics Insight podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, and we will be back with more exciting discussions on technology and innovation. Until then, stay curious and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible with AI. Thank you so much.